The question is, how old is R1A? How old is this Z93 subclade, and so on? So we Indians love complexity. We love to get into the details. So what is this entire matter? It's about the Aryan invasion migration question. What is the origin of the Indian people? Are most Indians descendants of foreign invaders, so-called Aryans? That was the original thesis, the original theory, which was propounded in the 19th century by Max Muller and various other foreign alleged historians and so on, based on various claims and considerations on biblical chronology and all that. So initially, it was claimed by foreigners that Indians, especially North Indians and Western Indians and other Indians as well, are descendants of white-skinned foreign invaders who came in from Eastern Europe. Aryans. They brought in the Sanskrit language. They brought in Hinduism. So Hinduism and Sanskrit are invasive forces. They are the language and the culture of oppressors and colonizers. Right? So that was the claim. Then later it became very clear there is absolutely zero archaeological evidence of any invasion whatsoever. So then the story was changed and they said it was not an invasion, it was a migration. They slowly came in and migrated, and that's how they and yet the eventual end result was the same. They imposed their foreign language, Sanskrit, and their foreign culture and religion, Hinduism, and the evil caste system on the hapless native Dravidians, who are the original natives of India. Right? So that is the migration claim. Now, even there is no evidence for a migration, because when there's a migration, there is a change in the archaeological record. So now they are trying to base their claims on, they are now saying there are multiple small waves of migrations and there is a genetic imprint that trickles into India and so on and so forth. So they are continuously changing the story. And now that Indians have caught onto the genetic thing, now they are making it complicated. So not just, so the one of the primary genetic lineages, patrilineal lineages in India is the R1A1A lineage. It is called R1A1A. Its parent is the R1A lineage. The parent of R1A is the R1 lineage. The parent of R1 is the R lineage, and so on and so forth. It all dates back to the F lineage, which is ancestral to more than 90% of all males, non-African males who are alive today. And the F lineage originated in India about 65,000-70,000 years ago. And the oldest non-African matrilineal lineages also originated in India around this time, M and N, right? So the question is, so R1A has been mischaracterized as the Aryan gene. And the thing about R1A is that it's found in high concentrations in the Indian subcontinent and also all the way in Europe. So that's why it seems like, it could have come in from Europe. There's a very significant concentration of the R1A1A imprint in Eastern Europe, in Northern Europe, in Poland, in Germany, in the Slavic regions, etc. Then in India, in parts of Iran. There's a whole continuum, right? So that's why they say that, there was a migration. And now there's the Yamnaya story, the Yamnaya angle as well. About 5,000 years ago, there was a massive invasion of brutal horse-riding warrior conquerors from the east into Europe, which totally changed the genetic demographics of Europe. So the older genetic demographics of Europe disappeared. The male lineages disappeared entirely, and they were replaced by these Eastern Yamnaya male lineages, which means these invaders killed off all the men and essentially took their women and had offspring with them. That's what happened, right? And this happened very rapidly. This was an unstoppable invasion. They have been called the most brutal genocidal invaders of all time in human history, these Yamnaya people. The question is, who are these Yamnaya people? And then there is the question of the steppe ancestry, which comes into India. So there is obviously affinity between the Indian genetic lineages and various genetic lineages which are identified as belonging to the Central Eurasian steppe region, and so on. So what is the truth? Where does all of this originate, right? That's the question. And then they complicate matters by saying there are various subclades of R1A, like R1A, Z93, and so on and so forth. So what's happening? So my point is very simple. Instead of going deeper and deeper into smaller and smaller details, you need to look at the bigger picture. The question is very simple. What is the origin of the R1A lineage? What is the origin? Where did it originate? We know that it originated between 15 and 25,000 years before today, right? And it appears that it originated in the Indian subcontinent. Now we need more data. More data is forthcoming soon. I I am informed by very reliable and well placed sources that a new paper is going to be published this year by Indian scientists. I know because I've spoken with Dr. Neeraj Rai. I'm in contact with him. So most likely this year, a new paper is going to be published, which is going to demonstrate and prove that the R1A genetic lineage originates in the Indian subcontinent. How do you know a genetic lineage originates in a certain place? You know it when that region, geographical region, has the highest diversity of that particular genetic lineage. Wherever you have the highest diversity is always going to be the origin place of that lineage. And so let's have a little patience. Let's wait for a few months more. Let the paper be published. We all know that it originates in India. This is going to be just the corroboration of what we already know. Other papers have already been published that show that demonstrate that the R1A lineages are the oldest in India. But let's wait for this new paper to come in with lots of more data, which will prove beyond any doubt that R1A originates in India. And some preparation is already happening for this. Let me share something with you all. I think I've shown this before, but let's bring this up once again. So one of the major proponents of the invasion hypothesis, invasion myth, has been Dr. David Reich. David Reich. So David Reich wrote a book in which he has made these claims, and he has also hired a minion, an Indian minion called Tony Joseph, who wrote a book of his own about what is it called? I don't know what it's called. It makes all these weird claims, all these fictitious claims that Indians originated outside India, in the steppe and all that. So this is a very recent lecture that Dr. David Reich gave. It was on the 12th of July. Today is the 31st of July, 2022. This lecture was about 19 days ago. Yeah. What does Dr. David Reich say in this lecture? So let me just read it out. It's just a couple of paragraphs, so bear with me. So the title is The Genetic History of the Southern Arc, a bridge between West Asia and Europe. What does it say? We present an integrative genetic history of the Southern Arc, an area divided geographically between West Asia and Europe, but which we define as spanning the culturally entangled regions of Anatolia and its neighbors in both Europe and West Asia, Cyprus, Armenia, Iraq, and Iran. We employ a new analytical framework to blah, 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 and so on and so forth, a very detailed thing. Our comprehensive sampling shows that Anatolia received hardly any genetic input from Europe or the Eurasian steppe, from the Chalcolithic to the Iron Age. This contrasts with Southeastern Europe and Armenia, which were impacted by major gene flow from Yamnaya steppe pastoralists. And there's another thing here. A striking signal of steppe migration in the Southern Arc is evident in Armenia and northwest Iran, where admixture with Yamnaya patrilineal descendants occurred, coinciding with the 3rd millennium BC displacement from the steppe itself, and so on. What else does it say? Okay, so the impermeability of Anatolia to exogenous migration contrasts with our finding that the Yamnaya had two distinct gene flows, both from West Asia, suggesting that the Indo-Anatolian language family originated in the eastern wing of the Southern Arc, and the steppe served only as a secondary staging area of Indo-European language dispersal. This is all very complicated, but you know what he is trying to say, Dr. David Reich? He is now saying he has changed his entire tune. He is saying that the steppe served only as a secondary staging area for Indo-European language dispersal. The Indo-Anatolian language family originated in the eastern wing of the Southern Arc. What does it mean? He is saying it originated around Iran. Wait for a few months. He's going to say it originated further east from Iran. Iran is a part of the Indian subcontinent. It is geographically connected to the Indian subcontinent. It is an extension of the Indian subcontinent. We all know what is the origin of the Iranian Persian people. We know that. So now, see, the tune has changed. He is now saying, he is now admitting that the Indo Anatolian language family originated in the eastern wing of the southern arc, which is in Iran, essentially, he's saying. And the steppe ancestry served only as a secondary staging area of Indo-European language dispersal, which means that there was something before the steppe ancestry. Now, the only question now which needs to be answered, it is, what is the ancestry of the steppe ancestors? These so-called steppe genes, where did they come from? He's clearly saying that the steppe is not where it originated. It's all going to circle back to India. Wait for a few months. So that's what I will say about this. We can go into lots of small details about R1A Z93 and how old is that. That is not important. That is not important at all. We need to look at what is the origin of R and R1 and R1A and R1B. The Yamnaya were R1B, descendants of R1. What is the origin of R1A? What is the origin of R1? And what is the origin of R? And I can guarantee, wait for some time, wait for a few months, wait for a few years. By this decade, by the time this decade is out, it will be proven conclusively that R itself originates in the Indian subcontinent. This is going to be the end of the Aryan invasion, migration, tourism, picnic theory once and for all. It's just a matter of time. We can already see the wheels in motion. Even Dr. David Reich is now admitting this all originates in this incredibly long-winded, complicated, convoluted fashion. He's admitting that it all originated. He's now claiming Iran. Earlier, they used to claim it was the steppe, the Central Asian, the Eurasian steppe. Now they are saying it's Iran. A few months or a few years down the line, they are going to admit that it came from the Indian subcontinent, from India. It's going to happen. And these disposable minions like Tony Joseph will be discarded. You know, Tony Joseph, I mean, when his book came out, I read the entire book. I wrote a detailed review article, which was really scathing, but it was factual. Okay. I pointed out all the holes in the claims that he has made. You can read it. Just Google it, right? Google AbhijitChavda Tony Joseph review. So I wrote this article. Then we had an interaction on Twitter. I invited him for a factual, polite debate, on YouTube. And let's discuss your book. And let's go through the evidence and see what makes sense. He refused. He ran away. He wrote this book, but he doesn't have the confidence to defend it. So that tells you everything you need to know about this entire matter.